Welcome back into the 2022 Top Buffs Countdown. Number 4 is linebacker Josh Chandler-Semedo, one of 2 transfers to be included in the top 4 of this year's Top Buffs Countdown. Big get for the Buffaloes here, William, especially as they move forward without Nate Landman. If I don't think any of us really felt great about CU's inside linebackers group, but I feel like it went from a massive question mark to a position that you feel actually pretty decent about, and that's all because Chandler-Semedo transferred in.
Yeah, and I was thinking the exact same thing. Josh Chandler-Semedo has 31 starts at the Mike linebacker spot at West Virginia. The big question mark was who's going to play Mike, and it was going to be Quinn Perry, and nobody was happy with him. Well, maybe that's not fair, but a lot of people had question marks, let's put it that way, about Quinn Perry replacing Nate Landman. And now I think that you replace Nate Landman at Mike with a guy who's maybe just as good in a different kind of a way. Now, I went and watched some film from Josh Chandler-Semedo last year. He is not the same linebacker and did not play in the same defense as Nate Landman. So don't expect to see him slashing through the line and making those tackles in the backfield. He got all Big 12 mention. He got 110 tackles last year, 1.5 sacks, 2 interceptions, 3 pass breakups, 2 forced fumbles. He's kind of all over the field making things happen. Started 13 games at Mike last year, 31 games total in his career at Mike. So he's a guy with experience at this position. Now he's 5'10", 2.25, so he looks very different than Nate Landman as well. But he's going to fit much better into the modern game, I think, than Nate, because he's very good in space. He's very good in coverage. So I think he's really going to give us some options at linebacker. The other thing he does is he takes Quinn Perry and makes him a situational player. Now you could put him in situations, like goal line or short yardage where Quinn Perry's not a bad player. He's just not a guy that you want out there on the corners covering tight ends and whatever. So when you can put him into situations that fit his game, he can be very solid. And with Chandler, suddenly now, you got Chandler at Mike, you got Robert Barnes at the other inside linebacker, and then you got Quinn Perry, Marvin Ham, and some other guy, Isaac Hurtado and Mr. Williams, I think, have shown flashes of things in spring. And all of a sudden that inside linebacker position doesn't look so bad. Looks pretty good, frankly, because we replaced an all-conference level player with an all-conference level player. And I expect Robert Barnes to kind of make that step to that level as well. So I think suddenly that inside linebacker position looks a lot better.
Yeah, it's interesting. I was chatting with somebody that covered Chandler-Semedo throughout his time at West Virginia and actually covered his recruitment, because this writer was living out in Ohio, where he hails from. He's from Canton, Ohio. Right. And this writer saw him his sophomore year of high school and thought he was going to be an All-American, but he just didn't have that growth spurt. You mentioned that he's only 5'10". Yeah. And I think if he was 6'1" or 6'2", he'd be playing at Ohio State right now.
Right. So Canton McKinley High School is, like a couple of those Dallas schools, one of the powerhouse high school programs in the entire nation. It has been for 30 years. It's one of those legendary sort of high schools. And, when you start there as a sophomore, you're a player.
Yeah. And so showed a lot of versatility at West Virginia, playmaking ability. And, this is a guy that was an MVP of a bowl game because he had some interceptions there. So a big play guy. Apparently he had lapses here and there in terms of knowing where his coverage responsibilities were. So maybe that's something to keep an eye on. But yeah, all of a sudden that depth at linebacker looks a whole lot different. I like CU's front 7 overall, and I think that's going to be a good group this year. But if you didn't have Chandler-Semedo part of that group, you probably wouldn't feel that way, right? I really do think this is as big an addition as they possibly could have brought into the program.
Yeah, we need, it's hard to argue against Tommy Brown because, man, the need on the offensive line was huge, but the need at that inside linebacker was just as big, and they went and found somebody. So, you have to give Darrell and his staff credit for finding these 2 guys to plug into huge holes. And then once you fill those holes, all of a sudden you've got some more options. And I'm very excited about Chandler-Semedo and what he can bring to the table as a buff.
Yeah, it's tough for CU to compete in this NIL landscape, but the one currency they do have is playing time. And Josh Chandler-Semedo looked around at some options, and he's going to be, look to be a star at CU. And so that was a big part
Yeah.
of him wanting to come to Boulder. And that's the expectation for him. Just 1 year to play with the Buffs, but big things expected. And that's why he came in at number 4 on our top Buffs countdown.
Yeah, and just one last thought, at 5'10", he knows he's got to play a lot and he's got to do something to get to the next level because it's going to be held against him, his height. So let's hope he does that here.
All right, up next, another transfer that we're going to talk about on the countdown.